We are back to 40 Day Wealth, the podcast about what it means to be an entrepreneur and what is their legacy. And today we have Nathan Hartwig, who is a genius, if I say, or I can say this. It's my podcast. In the biotech space, he's in a new industry, new company, and has recently changed from being in the employment space to in the entrepreneur space. And I'm very proud to work with you in this space. It's biotechnology, artificial intelligence, and it is something that we really could use. And when people talk about artificial intelligence, they don't really know the applications.
Sure.
And your company, first of all, is Biatech, Biatech, website's biatech.com. And if you could just summarize what it is that you are doing in a way that our audience would understand, because it's very sophisticated.
Yeah. Well, first of all, happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
My pleasure.
So Biatech is effectively a AI fusion startup. And so what it does is it takes a lot of different technologies and it puts them together. So you could imagine everything from like an acoustic sensor or listening to something, a computer vision where you take a normal camera that's on the side of your building and you take images from it, and then you start to detect things like using AI from it. Mm-hmm. But then the AI fusion is where you start to layer things together. Mm-hmm. So like you take a sound plus an image, and you in essence are doing advanced training models where you didn't actually have to code to tell them what the sound was because you already had the classification from the camera. So those are the types of things. Yeah.
So what kind of applications would somebody expect in this space that can be very helpful, make a major impact on society?
Well, I just look at what's happening in the last week in Texas and Oklahoma with the wildfires. Mm-hmm. So just having a camera that could then recognize a fire and give the owner of the property, a few minutes to a few hours notice before you get the normal alerts from official channels. So, that extra notice means that you got to get your cattle out, or your horses were out, or you evacuated safely with your family. So just using AI is much different than just using kind of a chatbot for, answering questions quickly, as a replacement for like some of the other search engines. But we're really using it for an application purposes. So taking, cameras and doing advanced visual mapping of things. So understanding the percent likelihood of something failing before it fails because you drove by it with a long wave infrared camera, which is just a thermal camera, where you in essence did a time-based analysis to understand the last time that you came by it, it was 15 degrees cooler. What's changed? So those are the types of things we're looking at.
So what is the first projects or first few projects that you're going to use this application for?
Yeah. So I'll try not to go too technical, but geothermal is what we're working on right now. Mm-hmm. So we're working with Department of Energy. They gave us a grant to actually bounce sound beams off of flow and use the AI to measure the sound in order to predict the flow. Okay.
What impact would that have, for example?
Yeah, so today a lot of people, if they have long linear assets, so you can imagine gas pipelines, you can imagine multi-phase flow through it, so steam and water, other things. Many times you don't censor it because it's expensive, or you in essence don't know what you would be doing with that data. Mm-hmm. So we would effectively be measuring for things like gas leaks, or if there's someone drilling next to the pipeline that you own. Or if you had excessive sway in your power lines, we could put a computer vision system that in essence tells you there's a higher likelihood of failure at that point because we understand what's happening, and the system's effectively self-aware of what should be happening.
So in essence, you're using artificial intelligence to gather data in order to educate the user on what potential failures you could have in the future, so that you could be proactive before you have a situation.
Exactly right.
And there's a huge use of this. And the way I look at it in this space, because you have a company right now that is just going to, for lack of better words, maybe not appropriate, explode, but properly, not literally.
Yeah.
And you're in the space right now, companies like NVIDIA have been in, and we've seen such huge returns on people's investments.
Yeah.
And what's wonderful is you are in that space. You're not competing against the NVIDIAs, but it's the concept of being in that space where there is a definitive need, but it's not something that you're selling widgets and people go, oh, I like that widget, or you're selling shoes and you say, okay, that is a nice shoe and that shoe has a market share because there's an audience for that.
Yeah.
Your audience is everyone. You know, it's virtually the entire world is your clientele in this space, if you really think about it, because who's not going to want to know, you know, it's crisis management in the energy sector, as an example, but it also has various applications that could be utilized in various other fields down the road. If you could explain a few other applications.
Sure. Well, one other, and I can't reveal who it's with, but it's a government lab in the U.S., and we're in discussions on, you know, how do we actually use large language models, which is the generative AI type deep neural networks, in order to map how they make decisions for selecting chemicals.
Right.
And in that type of an application, what they're trying to do is get more productivity out of that asset. And they're in essence looking at millions of potential interactions of the different options that they could choose. And what this model would do is effectively, give them a prioritized list of 100 things that they've never even thought about doing.
Right.
Because when you're a deep expert, like in a chemistry lab as an example, you know the space and you know what's worked. And so you normally are kind of constrained by, I only have 15 minutes today to do this piece to it. I'm going to take the 3 things that I know about. I'm going to try to put those together to see what reactions come and whatever it may be. But just being able to take what's happening in the biomedical space on how they were designing proteins and how they were predicting the reactions of things before they happened, just taking those open source databases and bringing them into an energy field where somebody's looking at saying, how do we increase productivity or throughput, using the same deep learning models. So anyway, those are other applications beyond just advanced measurement and monitoring for AI.
But most of your clientele is business to business. It's not to the consumer, but it's one of those things that because it's business to business, most people don't really understand what you do.
Okay.
Other than the people who are, so what I'm trying to do is just simplify a complicated concept.
Yeah.
But when you look at it, what I love about it is you're in an industry that has, I think, a market cap in the trillions, not in the billions. It's one of the few industries that if you do this right, which I'm confident you are, you have, like I said, you have the entire world as your clientele. And you have so much you can do utilizing the technology and reapplying it to different purposes, kind of like I mentioned earlier, maybe it's not a great example, but it's an example that is illustrative at best. You have Uber, you have an application like Uber, which revolutionized the taxi service, the way you transfer, you go from A to B. You no longer have downtime for a taxi driver, and you now don't have that challenge when you're in the car of, oh no, I'm at another light, and you watch the meter go. And they just changed the entire way. They were a disruptor, for lack of better words. And then they took the technology and said, well, we have this technology. We can now apply it to Uber Eats. You want food? It's the same platform. Yeah. And what you're doing has various applications, but it's the same platform. So if you could go into some other things that are on the horizon other than what you're doing right away, just to give a little of taste of what the true market is.
Sure. So I guess I'll lay it out in 3 steps. So, all of them are focused on assets today.
Right.
Naturally, as we mentioned with the chemistry example, it can be, beyond that into formulations and other things. But, on the asset side, we're starting with, asset monitoring, moving into asset management, and then ultimately asset optimization. And so the lenses across those things are to say you have a camera today, you now add a second camera that has a infrared to it. So you can now see a heat image, a temperature gradient through a heat image and a camera. And then you put those two things together and you can apply AI to it to blend the images together and give you advanced intelligence where you're training models on a blend of things rather than them individually. Adding in an acoustic signal, for example, if you were in a wildlife situation and you had an acoustic signal, you could actually tell which bird species was flying overhead just by the sounds that they're making. And so if you said, hey, here's everything on your endangered species list, if you had a list of bats, for example, that are on the endangered species list in Texas, we could tell you where they're at. Because of the sounds that they make. And these are the types of things I think on the monitoring side that could get into emergency alerts and other things. And then on the management side to it, it's how do you integrate that into your system? So somebody getting a text message is great, but that's not really scalable. So, who's the individuals that get 500 text messages? And so this needs to be integrated into a true management system where in essence, the system is, for lack of a better term, self-aware, and it tells you when it's important. It's not kind of you having to manually look at every specific piece. The same as, looking at a person in a watchtower that, knows, okay, that's probably not a big deal, or that is a big deal. How do you, in essence, elevate people's thinking and awareness of things beyond that? And then on the last piece of it, of the asset management, when we're asset optimization, when we're getting into this piece, what we're talking about is a 3D, photorealistic style mapping of assets that takes everything from a point cloud like LiDAR. It overlays RGB or normal camera images on top of it, and then it gives you context data associated with it. So if you had a temperature or pressure or flow alarm that went off, your system should know not only that alarm went off, which is the systems that exist today, but what does that mean? So what's the end result of your productivity as a result of that alarm going off? Because it's aware of where it's at and the physics-based models that sit behind it that determine the flow and ultimately energy created at the other side or the volume of product that's being sold at the other side. So that's the next piece.
Right, so I'm going to try to simplify this. Okay, so at the end of the day, you have technology that can go out and identify potential issues in, among other applications, infrastructure, right?
Correct.
So, all these bridges a few years ago that had the issues, that you can now say, okay, we could identify prior to a bridge collapse what the issue is, what the risk is. Take Sunny Isles in Florida, the building that crashed. Or, that overnight just, got demolished. At the end of the day, what you can do is identify the risk. So what I love about what you do is the application, but the use of the application is, in just about any facet of what you do in a way where you can now eliminate a lot of the human error and the failures by identifying proactively rather than what we do usually now is reactively. All of these condos along the beach are now getting these huge assessments because they cannot identify the risk. So what they're doing is they have to fix it. Where if you can use your technology, one of thousands of applications, you could identify this building, the structure is fine right now, but we know with our monitors and artificial intelligence what to look for. If there was erosion, beach erosion, which made the foundation a little bit more susceptible, what is it? And the technology is out there, and one of the things that you have the ability to do is to have the use of artificial intelligence used in a way that is extremely meaningful that nobody's thinking about. Everyone thinks about artificial intelligence, at least from my perspective as a lawyer, it's okay, ChatGPT. That's great. You could write a report. You could get if I'm in high school, I could write a report and get an A, hopefully, if my teacher didn't catch me. But really, what is the true application of artificial intelligence?
Yeah.
And this is what it is. It's be able to be proactive in identifying risk out there.
Right.
And you're starting in one field, but it's a universal application. And correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I'm not in your space. I'm a lawyer. I do a podcast.
No, you're spot on. And, we're not doing anything in real estate today.
Right.
But if you have a rigid structure in the ground on one side of it and you bounce a square wave through it, your AI can tell you if it has integrity or not. You're in essence inverting seismic activity and how you monitor seismic. But if you did that on the wood pole that happened in Texas, and you would have known that it was rotten and it was going to fall because it didn't have the fortitude to stand.
Right.
Now that's prohibitive cost-wise to go test every pole that's out there. So we're going to have to find efficient ways to go do things, very quickly,
Right.
using autonomous things.
But what's really interesting is there's so many other applications, insurance companies, for example.
Sure.
Risk mitigation. You want a deduction on your homeowner's policy.
Yeah.
We can use your technology to identify risk where there is issues that you wouldn't see with the human eye.
So if every kind of major, and I say landowner mainly because we're in the B2B space, right? But if a major landowner took an existing camera that was pointing at their parking lot and fed that feed to us, we could tell them if there was a fire in their property before they could. That should add value when they're renegotiating their insurance premiums.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then what happened in Texas with these fires, you could have identified it ahead of time, and you could have, you may not have been able to eliminate the fire, but you could have eliminated the risk and the casualties.
Yeah, very true.
And that's just one of thousands of applications. And again, I'm kind of creating a very advanced concepts with what you do, so our audience can understand in a way that is applicable. It's, I hate to use the word Uber, but it's a platform, just like any other platform that has purposes that you haven't even thought about yet.
True.
But the platform itself is there to create the opportunities to overall minimize risk, eliminate issues that we have, help endangered species, which is one of the things that I'm really near to my heart. We work with someone that has an endangered species fund. I guess that's a plug. But it's universal. And who is your competition right now?
So our competition is actually really everywhere. And I say that because there's a lot of really smart, tech startups that are working on specific pieces that are similar to ours. None that I know of have the same vision and are looking at this kind of very holistically for energy industry, utility industry, and others. The larger companies, like my predecessor where I came from, very, very strong technically. So there's a lot of people that are big in energy spaces, but they're really focused on how do they get to the $1 billion. We're very happy to go chase a couple $100,000 and add value in those spaces and then learn by doing.
Right. And if you could just summarize your background, because you have a great background. You're not just someone who just decided overnight, I'm going to go into AI space because it's sexy.
Fair enough. So I started 25 years ago at Mobil Oil. So that does date me a little bit. And then I very quickly became ExxonMobil. And then at ExxonMobil, I was a field engineer. So I was a tribologist. So the understanding of friction and wear and rotating equipment. So if it went back and forth, round and round, I probably crawled through it in some form or fashion. So everything from steel mills, pulp and paper mills, cement, bar mills, industrial manufacturing, assembly, anything in the Midwest where people were building things. The first 6 years of my life at ExxonMobil was going to help them to solve problems.
Right.
ExxonMobil sent me to do my MBA, and then I went into the corporate headquarters at ExxonMobil for a couple of years. Did everything from kind of the global projects for planning and budgeting to kind of sales and marketing, so a lot on the deeper function side of things. And then I went to McKinsey and Company. So was at McKinsey for 4.5 years, still in energy, and did, stuff all over the world. So, had great projects. If you named it where there was a really big oil company in a really important place, I probably spent 6 months there.
Oh, really?
And
so you were in the Middle East a lot, I would imagine.
I was in the Middle East a lot, yes. And, Asia and Europe and, all over America. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, interesting. And I need to plug a good friend of mine here, Julio Gonzalez, Engineer Tax Services. He's one of the people that really believes in what I'm doing with this podcast and supports it. And he's helpful in many ways with my clients, especially in this space. It would be not, he does a lot in cost segregation, but research and development credits, tax credits, utilizing the tax code to a way that would benefit not only you, but people who would invest with you, and put it in a way that makes sense for everybody. Because at the end of the day, you pay money to the government, or you use that money through tax credits and every other, in a way where you can invest in the business. Ultimately, the government's position doesn't have to be as big because private enterprises, work it. Capitalism, everything like that. And working with Julio Gonzalez, what's great about it is if there is some credits or if there's grant money out there, he could identify it. And this is a space that I love because the application is so new, and you're at this place where everyone said, how can I get into NVIDIA 2 years ago? How could I get into Uber 5 years ago? This is the time to do things. This is the technology. This is the background that you have. Everything is lining up. And now people are being more open-minded to the usage of artificial intelligence. And, it's expanding my horizon, not even realizing the value of it other than writing reports or researching data or reviewing contracts.
Sure.
Artificial intelligence has a place, whether or not we like it, it's not the question because it's here to stay. So we have to now implement it in a way where artificial intelligence is our friend. So what we're trying to accomplish in, at least in today, and the purpose of today's podcast is, I want people to know about what you're doing, what my clients are doing in space to make an impact on society.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we're really trying to do is make this world better than when you came to this earth. When you leave, how did you make this better? And what do you envision this company accomplishing in the next 40 plus years?
It's a great question. One of the things that we founded the company on is this, this thought or idea around, what are you doing for humanity? Like in every major mission purpose statement and every kind of team meeting where we're talking about forward looking of what are we working on, what's our product roadmap, we always come back to our values, which is around what are you doing that anyone cares about? How do you see your footprints behind you, quite literally?
Right.
And in 25 years in energy, that's something that all with kind of top companies, right? So McKinsey and Company is amazing. ExxonMobil is fantastic. Schlumberger, the last 10 years where I was with them, the world's best energy technology company. But what did you personally contribute? And then how do you see that manifest in what they're doing today?
Right.
And in those companies, you're part of an amazing culture, but you're part of their culture, right? And it's not what are you personally contributing in order to kind of advance things forward. So your question was around 40 years, how did we help? I think we meaningfully changed humanity. Like that's actually something that we're planning to do.
And how so? I'm going to ask you the hard questions now. How is this world going to be better because of this technology?
So number one, you'll be able to have productivity that you were never able to do with a lot of really smart people doing things in a traditional way. Example is producing more from less.
Right.
So while we're focused on energy, the other AI applications are in food. Like there's going to be a food challenge in 20 years. It's
Right.
coming.
Yes.
So what are we going to do about that? As you're thinking about, how do we get energy to places that don't have energy today? There's states in the U.S. like New Mexico where, over 20% of the population lives in poverty today. Over 50% of the population in New Mexico, their language at home isn't English.
Right.
So how are you going to take power in an affordable way and decentralize it to bring it to people that are not going to be able to afford the really, really expensive product that they have today in that application? And so I think bringing power to people unlocks poverty.
Right.
It unlocks access to a future economy. And as soon as somebody has kind of Wi-Fi access effectively, they're now plugged into the rest of the world and they can contribute in a way that's on par with developed nations.
Wow. So you think this is going to have a universal impact?
That's what we expect.
And right now, you have very little competition, but do you think there's going to be government interference or anything that on that spectrum? Because you have something that,
Yeah, so I think government today is an enabler. There are regulations under discussion. I sat in an AI hearing at the House last summer, and there's a lot of people learning about it now. But at the same time, in several discussions with members, they are open to learning. They are nervous that they don't want to kind of overregulate and kill innovation, but at the same time, they want to make sure that they're protecting their constituents and keeping them safe. And so, any really modern thing, imagine kind of a couple hundred years ago, they would call this magic and they would
Right.
say heresy and they would start killing people, right?
Exactly.
And this is not that. At the same time, people are nervous about it. And this thought of singularity remains a question where it's the potential for a true AI, a generative AI system to become aware enough and know as much as a human. And so once you cross singularity, then you're saying, is it effectively smarter than an individual? And is there a path then that it's, more destructive against humanity as opposed to for it? So I think there should be guardrails in place.
Right.
I'm a fan of open communication and transparency, and let's talk about things. And sometimes you need to go slower to go faster. That's not the space that we're in. We're going very, very fast, but we're going very fast in things that are practical. It's not kind of trying to split an atom in a different way. It's about saying you have these sensory inputs. How can you get more information out of those sensory inputs? Yeah.
Now, how can you? I don't want to use the word convince because convince is it's a challenging word, but how can you position it where people are fearing artificial intelligence? Recently, Google, you could just take away a piece of history, and then all of a sudden artificial intelligence is creating a different reality than the one that occurred. We discussed this earlier. An algorithm can take away the Holocaust as if it didn't occur.
Yeah, sure.
And now people are learning and looking into technology because I see my kids, I always bring up my kids 10 and 12. They are learning in a different way. I don't know whether to embrace it. It's the reality that we live in right now, that they're not even learning how to write cursive anymore because
why do they need to learn
why
that?
do they need to learn that, right? So the concern that I have as a father is whatever AI is telling them, it's going to be the gospel. It's the truth. So that's the manipulation. That's the how do you control the algorithms to get to truth rather than to get to people's economic interests.
Yeah, I think iron sharpens iron in general. And
Right.
so what I like about what's happening in AI right now and other technologies is there's a lot of open source. And what open source means is that anyone can effectively go look at the code and
Right.
see how it's thinking about things. Now, how you train it post use is different, and you can actually train the same AI model to have different outcomes based on how you train it.
Right.
But I think as long as it's well communicated, it's open for people to understand and see. I think you then have the multiple factions that have different views. You equip all of them equally, and then you let them have the debate. And that's actually the government that we have, the democracy that we have is based on this.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you have to be realistic about is accept the fact that it's not going to disappear. It's just about who's going to control it now. Either we are the forefront of the technology and we're the leaders in it, and we are the main use of artificial intelligence, or if we stick our heads in the sand, you have countries like China, Russia possibly, who could recreate whatever narrative that they want by producing a product that everyone needs and have an intended, unintended consequence of redirecting the truth, as they call it in Russia, pravda, right? The truth is what they want it to be. Yeah. So how do we take advantage of it is we have to embrace it here. Is this is a technology that's not going anywhere and has wonderful positive applications. But then again, if you go back into history and you go back into when technologies, people have changed, technology has changed the way people have lived. The use of a car, everything. People were against it, but there's no way you could stop it from happening.
Right.
So you might as well embrace it, work with the good guys, get the best use, and do something where you can change society for good.
I think it's well said.
And we only have 6 seconds left, so this flows always. The show goes always so quick until the third part of the episode. Is we're going to put you on the hot seat there and ask you questions that you don't know. You don't know the questions yet, so we'll see who you really are. And at the end of the show, we ask you to conclude and to sign off on the show.
Okay.
And we'll be right back. We are back. We are now at the third part of our show, which is the hot seat, or hot seat for you. It's just a couch for me. We're going to ask you some random questions. There's no wrong answer yet. So we'll find out if there is a wrong answer. I'll tell you. But whatever comes to mind, just purpose of this is to just really get to know who you are as an individual. So we'll ask questions that are out of left field, and we'll see what your answers are. First question is, who was your childhood celebrity crush?
Childhood celebrity crush. So I didn't grow up watching a lot of TV. Right. I was a little bit on the the other side of the tracks, if you will. But I think the exposure I had through friends was really around, Star Wars and kind of this, that was very big, in my, developing years. So probably Carrie Fisher.
Wonderful.
That would, because of her kind of, mission and, orientation of helping and saving and kind of fighting this kind of, big ethereal monster, if you will. So,
and she was a princess.
It wasn't bad, It wasn't bad that she was a princess.
Because it took place in the past, many years ago.
It did.
So she was
in a faraway place.
Yeah, a galaxy far, far away, right? Person you would trade places with for just one day?
Person I would trade places with for one day? Probably Elon Musk. Yeah, it's he's doing amazing things, and my respect for him has kind of grown substantially just like as the years have progressed. I wasn't always, really enamored by what he was doing, but the more that I saw the vision of what he was trying to do, the more I would love to just be in his shoes for a day, to just be part of those technical conversations that are going on, but they're going on with a very small closed group. Right. And so just being the fly on the wall to hear what's happening there, I think would be fascinating.
What I find interesting about him is that most people think it's that they go into business to be billionaires. And for the glory, he doesn't even own real estate. He doesn't own a house. He, when he was working for, I think it was Tesla at the time, or maybe it was prior to that, he would sleep in the center of the office. So he didn't even have his own office, and he would sleep under the desk. And his philosophy was, I'm putting 100+ hours, I'm sleeping here, that's how hard I am, that's how working, that's how dedicated I am to this. So nobody can come into the office and say, I'm working too many hours, because he led by example to the point where it was extreme. But You know, sometimes you don't get success without that, you know.
To bridge off that point, you know, my wife and I, we sold our house. We sold all of our really nice luxury cars, and we're now in an apartment.
Yes.
And we took that to invest into the company to build and grow something.
And that's what, I love that you say that, because that's really what the purpose of this show is. Because people say, oh, being rich, you know, in a lot of areas, it's frowned upon. But people don't understand, it's not about being rich. Being rich to me is the freedom of doing what you want.
Yeah.
And not having to worry how you can do it. You know, whether it's working around the clock or it's taking 3 weeks off and not having to read an email, or both. And people don't really understand the sacrifice to take comfort and have this attitude where you think at sometimes, I'm sure you do, that you're crazy. Like, I'm crazy to do this. You had an amazing job and a wonderful salary and everything you could ever want. And you took the leap of faith.
Yeah.
And that leap of faith is going to pay out exponentially. I'm confident in it, but I just don't think many people understand what it takes. They're always waiting for an opportunity where the opportunity is created, not, you know, just knocking on your door. Guilty pleasure. What is a guilty pleasure of yours?
Taking time off work. I probably would have answered it differently a year ago, but in a startup, you don't have guilty pleasures.
No.
Like you're all in. You sleep, eat, and work, and that's a startup, and it's one that we're embracing.
Right.
But you can't do that without the support of a fantastic family member, which my wife has been amazing for, you know, the 20 plus years that we've been together. She's moved around the world with me, living in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and you know, dealing with the McKinsey travel where, you know, I was home on weekends, maybe. You know, so yeah, you do this as a team. You can't do it as an individual. And then I think that if you're just looking at how did you become successful and how did you achieve things, people see you in that point of achievement, but they don't necessarily understand or appreciate what was the investment that led into that. Yeah. And I think that's the point that you're making quite strongly, is that things don't just happen overnight. No. You earn them, you take them.
The only place where I see that differently is like people who are doing OnlyFans, but that's but that's a different guilty pleasure, right? But that's short term, and I would imagine that's not a legacy type strategy you want to produce to the next generation. Biggest risk you ever took?
It'd have to be leaving 25 years as a senior executive on the path. So I was on the path at ExxonMobil, you know, on the path at McKinsey, on the path at Schlumberger. So to kind of walk away from presidential track in each of these to do something, you know, where you have no income. And the only cash flow is the cash flow that you're paying other people to help you to develop what you're working on. So that would certainly have to be the biggest risk. But I think that, you know, risk is variable, right? And so for me, it's different today than it was 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, risk would be, you know, hey, you know, did you take the right vacation? Did you, you know, invest in the right stock? It's not, you know, some of the risk we see from others around the world are, you know, life or death risk, you know, hunger or, you know, an abundance of food and risks. And so I think it's relative to every person and where they're at in their journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Best compliment you ever received?
Well, I'm torn here between kind of Tom Brady and Elon Musk. Right. But it would have to be someone saying, you remind me of, and it being kind of someone that, you know, I think is pretty amazing.
What about saying you remind me of Elon Musk with the looks and athleticism of Tom Brady?
We could hang out more. Yeah. That would be quite the compliment. Yeah. But
what makes you? What never fails to make you laugh?
Just having the opportunity and situational awareness of things and a play on words. Like I when I say something, I often have about 3 levels deep to the meaning of it. And so depending on the audience, sometimes that's sometimes it's on the nose and sometimes it's not. But there's normally, even when I'm kind of coaching somebody, there's layers to it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, especially when you have kids, because there's some jokes like, I remember when I was a kid watching Richard Pryor in the movie The Toy.
Sure.
And I watched as a kid because I wanted to be the spoiled kid. I didn't understand all the adult humor in it. And then you watch as an adult, and I enjoyed the movie, but it was a completely different perspective because I was Richard Pryor, not the kid anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's funny, and it's like my kids could watch that entire movie and love it, but completely from a different perspective and not understand the subtleties of the humor behind it. Worst piece of advice you ever received?
Play it safe.
Yeah.
So I think that when you come up from a very, risk-adverse type culture, we're often taught you need to go do this because there's a job, and then you stay at the job, and then you retire from the job, et cetera. I think people think differently today, but I wish it was balanced more towards the middle rather than there's no loyalty and it's following a paycheck, et cetera. So, but I think for me the worst advice would have been don't take that risk. So had I not left ExxonMobil, which was an amazing company, amazing group, amazing bosses, that shaped me in terms of how I think about things. And then not gone into McKinsey, my eyes wouldn't have been opened on how the world works. And the work that the firm is doing, you'll never read about on the front page unless somebody messed up. Like you'll read about all the work that they do, but they'll never be mentioned.
Right.
Yeah. And so I think it's one of those interesting things that without taking the plunge of leaving something that was really, really good and taking the plunge to jump into something that was hard, and it takes you 6 months of prep work to do the interview at McKinsey. I don't know if you've ever kind of looked at this stuff, but like it's ridiculously hard to get into the firm.
Yeah, no,
and then kind of leaving that amazing opportunity to go into energy technology because I wanted to run things, and you can't run something at McKinsey. You hand off a 200-page PowerPoint doc, and you're like, we killed ourselves to put this together, and you should really do that.
Yeah.
And then you wait to read about it in the journal or not.
Wow.
I mean, that's...
It's one of the areas I don't promote in my law practice. We do crisis management. And if you think about, if you don't hear about the crisis, it went away, you can't promote the practice, right? So your success is basically self-defeating your ability to promote yourself, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
Something you wish you were better at?
I'd have to say triathlon.
Have you done a triathlon?
Yeah. I used to be in the top 3% of the half distance, the 70.3 for age group. And, it's something that we got into maybe 8 years ago or so. And I was all-world athlete for 4 of the 5 years following that. So in the top, 5% or so. And then now I wish I was better at it because it means I'd be healthier and fit, but it also means I'd be spending 12 to 18 hours a week training. Yes. So I don't know. Do I wish I was better at it? Yes. Do I have the time to be? No.
Yeah, but no, I didn't know that about you. And I would think I would do my first triathlon, but I would do it like the triathlon light.
There's a sprint. Yeah, the sprint is the right one to choose. Yeah,
because I could jog and I don't get tired. And I used to jog a lot, but I could ride a bike. It's the swimming part. I'm not a good swimmer, and
all you have to do is finish.
Yeah.
You know it if you don't.
Yeah, that's everyone. Maybe not everyone else notices it for a while. Where's that guy? Where is Evan? Yeah. He was doing great. I would hate to be like number one and I get in the water and then finish dead last. Yeah. But one of these days, I'm going to say it right now, I'm going to do a triathlon, a very light one, but
nice.
It's something that I want to do on my bucket list, just for my own self, because I think I can do it. It's just...
If you think you can, you can.
Yes. I'm good at 5Ks, so that's about it.
It's a great start.
Exactly. That's my figure. I'm not meant to do any other sport, team sports or anything. It's just...
Well, they also have relays where you can kind of rotate out the swim, bike, run with the different people. So that's a nice way to be a part of it and then learn.
And participate, but not have everything on you.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think I would do it myself just to know how I did. It's
very good.
It's a challenge. And sometimes in life you have to realize that you're not going to win in what you're doing, but you're doing it for other purposes.
Yeah.
You know, making a difference or making an example. You know, maybe if my kids see it, they'll realize, you know what, maybe this is their future.
It's true.
So I know I love my son to death, but I don't think he's going to be in the NBA, so I have to find another sport that he may.
Fair enough.
Who would you like to be stranded on a desert island with?
Probably my wife. I don't know anyone that I'd rather spend, like the last remaining days baking in the sun with.
Considering
see, honey, I told you I'd bring you on another vacation.
Exactly.
Yeah, so probably my wife.
Yeah, sometimes people say somebody who could build a boat, a carpenter, to get me off the stranded island. But I think your answer's perfect. Tell me something about yourself that we don't know. And now we know you're a triathlete. So
something else that you
can't
don't
use
know
that one
about me. I grew up Southern Baptist.
Okay.
So I grew up very kind of deep in beliefs and value systems, and those stay with me today. I think that was such an important part of my childhood, was that I wasn't raised by an individual; I was raised by a collective, and I think that that's needed to give structure and kind of broaden thinking. So that's probably the most important thing that maybe you haven't heard yet.
No, I haven't. But it creates your foundation of who you are, and again, this show is about what's your legacy. It's about bringing it back to how you're going to make a strongest impact.
Yeah.
And that's all the questions we have, but now you can use the next 22 seconds that we have to conclude the show however you want.
Well, I just want to end on this point that it's a collective, and the same is true for Biatech. We're not an individual, we will be a collective of people. And to say thank you to the Department of Energy for giving us a grant on the AI for geothermal acoustic monitoring, to say thank you for NVIDIA for inviting us to the Inception program, which is their high potential AI startup program, for working with AWS and some of their early thinking on how to structure our platforms in the cloud. This is the collective that makes everything better, and we're really, really appreciative to the people that have supported us.
Oh, I couldn't have said it better. And we have no time right now, so I thank you again for making the trip from Tampa, 4 hours today. I appreciate that. I appreciate your commitment to this, and I hope we get the audience to really realize who you are. And if you want to find more information about him, you could find me, and I will provide you what you need.